Hi everyone, it's Kathie. Thanks so much for joining me. I have another alternate card project to share with you, and we're going to feature the April 2019 Paper Pumpkin Kit. All right, so today we're going to have some inky fingers on this card project. Here's a quick look of it, and we're going to get started. I have Soft Sea Foam and also Daffodil Delight. And what we're going to do is create kind of a background using the big flower stamp. So it's going to be considered noise. That's what we're creating in the background on the one side of this card panel. And by the way, I am using the Staples brand. It's 110 pounds. And I did start off with this because I was kind of testing it out. But I decided to just follow through with it since it kind of turned out not too badly. So first and second generation on that soft sea foam, and then with the Daffodil Delight, only second generation because it is a strong color, but you do want the brightness. Now later on I do extend that one end. You'll see it afterwards. And then with Granny Apple Green, I only ink up 2 of the leaves, and then we'll just stamp on top of what we just created. Next, with Pacific Point, we're going to stamp out the flower. And I wasn't sure how many I wanted, so I just filled this panel. So when you ink up this flower, try not to press too hard because you don't really want to flood that center. Okay, and then the color I'm using is Balmy Blue and Pacific Point to define the center part of that flower. So basically I'm just adding a bit of color to the shaded areas, and then I'm going to hit it with the aqua brush. And make sure your brush isn't too wet. You just want it a little damp, just enough so that it'll move the pigment. And when you color in each of the petals, you want to leave some white areas so that it has some light highlights on each of the petals. Okay, and then with Pacific Point, I decided just to draw the strokes around each of the petals and not fill in that center. I haven't decided on what I was actually going to do, but just to define the center point of each of the flowers. And then we're going to cut out a few of these. I wasn't sure which way I wanted to go, but you mainly do want a couple of small flowers and then one much smaller. So at least 3 or 4 flowers. So there's the first one that's a little bit smaller than the original. And this one here was the smallest flower. And I'm just bringing back the marker because I took off a little too much on the edge. So I'm just getting that just a little bit more color there because it looked a little too white. And now I'm just trimming it down just a tad more to make it even smaller. And then the third one is pretty well almost the same size as the first one. And then once you're finished fussing about with that, we're going to move on to the fourth flower. So this one here, I'm situating the one petal that's flipped up down. So that'll be your starting point. And what I want is to create a side flower. And I do see one there, but I ended up taking a little too much when I traced around it, just so it gives me a guide on where to cut around it, basically. And while I was doing that, I added some dark highlights and then hit it with an aqua brush. And then I just trimmed it out. I was being mindful when I trimmed this out so that in case I wanted the flower on the other side, I guess. So I trimmed that out, and then here's the other piece. And I thought I'd just trim this other side, add some dark highlights to it, and now we're just going to move on to the next step here. With Garden Green Stampin' Write marker, I just created 2 strokes kind of going to the left, 1 going to the right, and then with Garden Green ink, just inking up that center leaf and then stamping off to create that top leaf of this leaf arrangement. And then I'm inking up the one side leaf of that stamp because it is smaller. So we're just going to build a leaf. And again, they're all second generation. You could go first, but I've just found it a little bit dark. All right, and then I'm just going to add a stroke to the center of each of the leaves to create the vein, and then I'm going to hit it with the aqua brush just to soften it up a bit. And then once you're happy with that, we'll just fussy cut it out. Okay, moving on to the next step, I'm using the corrugated pieces that came in the kit, and with gray granite. I've decided I'm going to just dirty up these pieces just so it has some kind of definition. I would have liked to have a pure white picket fence because that's what we're building. But it's going to be kind of like a flower box with picket panels on the back. All right, so with a scrap piece of white cardstock, I'm just going to stick down 2 of the panels. So this is going to be the box that we're creating, and it does look a little bit wide. So once I'm finished creating this, I do cut it back. With the gray granite Stampin' Right marker, I'm just defining the center part of this box before I stick down the next piece. And then I add some shading to the sides once I've cut out this piece. So here's the quick shading. And then for the other pieces, I'm just snipping off just one end just to create the tips of the picket fence, or the picket panels, I guess. And then we'll just shade it in a bit with the ink spot. And anything that looks a little too dark, you can just lighten it up with the aqua brush. It'll soften it up. Now this last piece, I'm just dirtying it up, and then I'm going to cut it in half. And this is what we're going to use to stick all those pieces together. So I do have some glue on that one piece in my hand. Just try to get it nice and straight. And then we'll stick down the next one. And then we'll snip off the excess. And now we have this cute little picket fence. I thought it was super cute. I loved it. And then I wasn't sure about this little box. All right, here's that panel. I took off a 1/4 inch. And then this little box, I took off a 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to reshade that one end. And it looks much more proportioned to the picket piece fence now. Honestly, I don't think it was required, but I stayed with my idea. So here's where I decided to extend this background design. And I did get a little heavy-handed here. So I did add a little bit more leaves along the sides to make it look a little more even. And then with Balmy Blue, I decided to shade that one side. And then I did shade around the entire panel just to get everything all blended together. So here's that picket piece. I think it's super cute. I just love how it turned out. I did stick dimensionals on the back, so I did raise it, and then I'm going to tuck one of the flowers behind it and one of the leaves that I created. And then I'm going to glue down the pieces behind that picket piece. And then that side flower, which was the second one that I created because it was smaller from the first. Just glued that one down. I glued the next flower. And then this last smallest one, I doubled up on the dimensionals. And then here are the tiny leaves. I did straight stamp that leaf. So I did use a couple of those. And then I did snip off one end, or one of the leaves, and then tucked it in between each of the flowers, just so it defined each flower. Okay. So you want the flowers kind of one behind and then coming up at the top and then flowing down towards the one side. So it has a bit of movement. And of course I had to reshade everything in again. Now the little tag I used from the kit, I tied a bow with the twine, stuck it down with a glue dot. Fussed with that, and also glue dots on the sentiment. Although it did bother me to have it kind of slanted, like it wasn't straight across. But I made myself accept it. All right, I stuck it onto a top folding card base, and I had this Melon Mambo, I believe, scrap piece. So it fit perfectly for this card project. And then I centered the flower panel to it. And the flowers, I decided to add the yellow glitter enamel dots to it, and then some blue ones just to add a bit of interest. And that's it. So you can see that I do have some inky fingers now after this project. It was really fun to create, and it had a little bit of everything. And here are some stills of the finished card. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for joining me. Bye for now.